Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the MindTalks podcast. And today's episode, we have a guest from a sport that we've not really covered much. And I think it's a sport that, for black people, is not talked enough about. So I have someone who's a talented ex-swimmer. She represented Great Britain. She was the first black female to represent Great Britain at the Olympics. Alice Deering, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. And yes, absolutely, we're going to have to get into that at some point about black people in swimming because it is a life skill. It's important. And I'm just going to first thing, everybody can swim. You all have the capability of learning how to swim.
100%. Yeah, you're going to have to talk to me about that a lot. So, I'm going to ask you a question I asked all my guests, the first question, which is, what was your first experience with sports?
Wow, that's a good one. First experience with sports must have been reception. Like when I was like 4 years old, it was like beanbag races, and I'm going to class it as a sport because it was a lot of fun. Do you know when you get the parachute in school and you're all holding the handles and you lift it up and you drop it down, and you lift it up and you all like run and swap places? Yes. I honestly think that was my first experience with sport. Swimming is intermingled with that quite quickly, but yeah, oh gosh, I haven't thought about that in ages. I miss playing those parachute games, man. That was a good time.
That was a good time. It's actually, you brought back memories for me because, I've not even thought about that. But yeah, that was probably my first experience as well. But you don't think about that at this age.
Yeah, it's like an unlocked memory, isn't it? Like all of a sudden, like, oh my God, that was a thing. Like, it was, well, obviously a different lifetime ago, but yeah.
Exactly. But then after that, so you did that. You mentioned a little bit about swimming. Was swimming the next sport that you did after that, or was there other stuff that you did at the same time?
Swimming was like, so I initially started swimming as just swimming lessons. So it was half an hour once a week, very basic, just learning the skill of swimming, basically, not trying to be competitive in any way. And then alongside that, I was doing ballet and dance, and I absolutely hated it. I remember I was terrible at it, didn't like it. I was always put at the back, the last person on stage, the first person off, and my mum took me out of that. And then maybe about a year later, she put me and my eldest brother into swimming club, and she didn't tell us about it. It was just like, you're going along on Sunday afternoon. I've seen the notice board at the club at the pool that you're both doing your lessons at still. You need to go and try a sport. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I didn't really want to go, to be honest. Neither of us did. It seemed inconvenient to our Sunday afternoon, but we went along and we both loved it. Like, he really enjoyed his session. I really enjoyed my session, and we got out asking my mum when we can next come back, basically, and she could see how happy we were, and it just became a passion from there, to be honest. And even still, with going through it, I never considered it as a career, definitely not, but also as something that I wanted to be in for a long time. It was just, I'm enjoying this at the moment, let's see where it goes. And every time I would kind of like make a new stage, so making counties, I got really excited that I made counties, and then I'd look at the regional times, and then I got my regional time, and I was like, okay, let's try and get a national time. And so it was always just like the next stage. It was never, there's the Olympic Games, I'm here at county level, how do we bridge this gap? It was always just step by step, which both like me and my mum and my brother like put onto ourselves, which was a really nice way of kind of managing it, because it gets intense very quickly when people realize that you have talent. So it was a good way of protecting ourselves.
What is it that you enjoyed about swimming?
Honestly, I think as a child, what I enjoyed most was a competitive outlet, a competitive outlet for myself, because I realized at school I was naturally quite competitive. I loved a challenge. Whenever it was like, oh, should we try doing something like this? And I was like, I'll do it. Like, I was always like, I want to give this a go. Like, I want to see what I can do and push myself. And I think swimming allowed an outlet for that, which wasn't just in an academic sense, because I really did enjoy school, enjoyed learning, but then having like another element to myself where I can get a sense of achievement and push myself and see where I can go was, I think, what I really enjoyed. And to be honest, I hated training half the time, or a good chunk of the time. I really didn't enjoy training. As a child, I don't really remember how I felt about it.
Yeah.
well, I say child, well, up to 12 years old, I don't remember how I felt about it. I must have enjoyed it at that point. But from 12 years old onwards, where I became much more aware of the swimming ecosystem and the expectations of athletes and what it takes to get to an Olympic Games, things got intense. It was good. I still obviously enjoyed it because I kept at it. But there was a lot of time where I was really in the trenches, so to speak, of my swimming enjoyment and career. And I'd kind of take time away from it. When I say take time away from it, I would take an afternoon off when I was absolutely really hating it. And I would go back into my mum's room afterwards and be like, oh, I feel bad that I didn't go training. Like, I did actually want to be there. And she was like, that's okay. We'll just go back tomorrow. Like, it's not deep. And that would happen maybe like 2 or 3 times a year. Like, for me, missing training wasn't ever an option or a consideration. But when I did feel in those low points, I think it is really important to take a step back, and that's honestly on each athlete to understand where that limit is for themselves, because we all do have that limit. I think I'm quite a self-aware person, so I know when I'm kind of like, okay, just take this off, don't worry about it. But it is a balancing act, because you still obviously have to work really hard to achieve what you want to achieve.
What was it about training that you didn't like?
I think it was the fear of sessions, to be honest. So some of these training sessions, so context for the event that I did, was always a distance swimmer. So I would swim. As a child, I was doing the 400 IM, the 200 fly. This is probably going to be meaningless to some people, but they are seen as the hardest pool events. And then moving forward, I went into the 400, 800, and 1500 meters freestyle, which are kind of like the second hardest lot of events. And then I realized I was good at open water swimming and got an opportunity to do that. Ended up being really good at it. And then you end up being in what some people, well, I argue and other people argue, is the hardest summer Olympic sport. So ended up doing marathon swimming, which is a 10K in open water. It takes 2 hours roughly to complete, and you're swimming like against other people, like in a massive pack, and it can be very physical, and it's a really tough race. I think what I struggled most with training was the amount of volume and meters that I just had to do that event. I just got bored. My mind would go other places. Concentration was difficult. I'd turn up to a session and just kind of be terrified of what was going to be on the piece of paper, like doing an 8K session and it's off crazy turnaround times. You're not going to get much rest. I still managed through it the whole time. I'm very stubborn. So even when I'm hating something, I'll still push myself through and do it. It might not be to a good quality, but I'm like, at least I did it. And then it's kind of an ebb and flowing of sometimes I would really enjoy training when it's going well. And I think that's the easiest time to be an athlete, is when training is going well, because you feel on top of the world, like everything's flowing, everything's moving perfectly. But then as a when it's struggling, when it's difficult, it's really challenging. And I went through some quite challenging periods, like up and down, and then it causes me to hate training even more. And then it's kind of a vicious circle that you're constantly moving around. And you need a good swim or a good training session to break that cycle, which can seem like miles away, because a good session could what I class as a good session is probably a great session, if that makes sense. And I think it's very typical for most athletes. We are very full of our performance, as we should be, because it's our livelihoods. But it's difficult to sometimes step back, take perspective, and realize that you're actually making great progress. I always said I didn't want to finish my swimming career with any regrets. And I'm actually I don't have any regrets in my swimming career. I'm really happy with all the choices and decisions that I made. The one thing I would say that if I had to pick one that I would regret is actually just not enjoying training as much. Because now that I've finished, I'm kind of like, oh, like you did have like a cool life and stuff like that. But at the time, it's really hard to see the outside perspective when that's all I've ever known. So it was a complicated relationship with me and training, basically. Yeah.
The thing is, training is something you hear from a lot of athletes in different sports, not enjoying it for various different reasons. For you, when you were going through those periods, what things would you do? What things helped you mentally to get through it? Because we all use different things. What was it for you?
Yeah, for me, it was, I think as I got older, I had started to reason with myself and be like, Alice, every training session is going to finish. I promise you, like, no matter how long this may feel, it will end. It has to end. Other people need to get in the pool. They can't keep you here forever. And you will get to go home. You'll get to eat. You'll get to sleep. You'll get to play video games. And you'll be back in that position before you know it. And it was even little times when I'd just like be sat at home and I'd just be like, just appreciate this moment. Just appreciate this moment. You're not swimming. You're not pushing yourself. You're sat here. You're playing like Overwatch or Witcher or whatever I was playing at the time. And appreciate that you're in this moment. And then when you're in your swimming moment, you accept that you're in that moment and you deal with that. So I think it was just understanding that it's not permanent. And I think that's a case for a lot of athletes where you're going through these hard times, and hard times are temporary, but also good times are temporary, and you just kind of have to accept the highs and lows and the roller coaster of it, and the fact that one day it will be over way quicker than before you can even imagine it. My swimming career was, well, I say career, I swam for 18 years. I obviously can't call it a career until I started like making money from it, because obviously as a 12-year-old, like that's not really a career, but anyway, I swam for 18 years, and just thinking back on those memories, I can't believe how quickly it went. And so I'm sat here like in the present, and I've retired from swimming. I'm really enjoying my life. And then I'm looking back on these memories very fondly, but still knowing that there was struggle and resilience needed behind it, if that makes sense. It wasn't all like you can put on your rose tinted glasses and be like, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. But in the moment, I hated it. And it's okay to accept that at that time I didn't enjoy it. I don't have to coat it with gold and pretend that it was all hunky dory and everything was perfect, because I think I'd be doing myself a disservice for that teenager or for that 20-year-old who was really, really hating where she was at in the present. And my feelings then were valid, and they're still valid now. And it's unfair if I was to try and wrap that up any other way.
You touched on it earlier on in terms of you being very competitive and you being competitive, that you always wanting to improve when it came to swimming. Was that you as a person generally, or is that stuff that you picked up during that journey of swimming? And also, did that apply for other areas in your life? When you enjoyed something, maybe a different sport or a different thing where you wanted to be good at, did you think I need to improve all the time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is naturally who I am, and I've been really fortunate to find the sport which I think I was just naturally inclined to do and just had a knack for. Other areas of life I've realized it's just I'm competitive, and I've actually actively, since I've stopped swimming, just been like, just chill out. Like, not everything. You don't have to try and like constantly improve or be the best. Even like doing exercise now, I've picked up running a little bit, and I say a little bit because I don't want to train towards anything. I'm not trying to do a half marathon or a marathon. I just wanted to do it to keep fit and, keep my body healthy. It's not, I don't want it to turn into another obsession. And people are like, oh, you should like go do a half marathon or try for a marathon. I'm just like, the moment you put me in that situation, I'm going to start doing like some stupid training sessions. I'm going to try and get down to like a time that's really quick for me. And it won't be quick overall, obviously, because there's some crazy fast runners out there. But like, I'll be pushing myself to this thing, and I just don't want to do that right now. Like, I'm in a place where all my life I've been chasing something physically, whether like to improve in the pool for a time or for a motion through the water or whatever. And I just don't want to do that right now. And I think maybe I'll mature and accept that I don't need to be trying to make the next team in whatever sport it is. But for now, I'm enjoying being mediocre
Yeah.
at things, and I don't need to try and take it any further, and it's nice. But yeah, in other aspects of life, like school for example, I was competitive. I wanted to try and get the best results, or in PE and other sports was always trying to like be the best.
Yeah.
And I think it's just who I am, and it's difficult, I think, especially as a woman, to be competitive, because it's seen, especially in non-competitive environments, obviously like school, it's seen as like, oh my god, she's crazy. But I think I've just been like, you know what, let's just lean into it. It's who you are. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's taking you to really cool places, so I can't be too mad.
Definitely. With swimming is something that most of us did in school, but then you eventually got to the point where you were taking it seriously. When you started taking it seriously, were you seeing other people that looked like you doing it, or was there lack of diversity really?
Yeah, it's a complex area to be honest because so I'm from Birmingham. So that's where the first swimming clubs that I went to were like Sandwell more specifically. It's a really, really diverse area. And so the swimming clubs I went to, there were always other people of colour there, or other families of colour, I should say. But then when we went to swimming competitions, that would dilute out very quickly. And there were quite a few times where we were the only people of colour at the competitions. And my mum, who was from Ghana, would be the one who would take me to these competitions. And I look back on it now, and obviously I was very naive as a child. I was very sheltered from this kind of this notion that black people don't swim, but it was always really easy to pick her out in the audience. And I like that. I like that it was like, there's my mum. You know, I didn't have to like try and look between faces or try and spot another person's parent. Like that's obviously my mum. And I just didn't think about it. And I'm really happy to say I didn't think about it. I think that's how people should feel in life. We shouldn't have to look around and think, oh my God, I'm the only person of XYZ here. And that might be the case sometimes, but it's difficult to move through life thinking like that. And I just imagine if I was 12 years old, looking at myself like outwardly and seeing like as the only black person at that swimming competition, how I would have felt. And it is alienating, but thankfully I didn't see it like that. The only time I realized that I looked like that was when I saw another black swimmer or an Asian swimmer, and I saw them. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I look like. And then it was like a mirror being held up to myself. But honestly, I didn't care. And it's really easy to, I know it sounds like really easy to say that, but I was just grateful I didn't, because it's a lot for anybody at any age to take on being the only one and knowing it. But for a child to feel that way and to feel out of place in any way is just like abhorrent. So I was fortunate that I didn't have that perspective on swimming. And I know that some other people through their swimming and sporting careers have felt that way, and they've told me about it, and they've still soldiered through it. It's tough. Like I can't imagine what it feels like to like feel like that. It's not fair, and it's just really have to stress like on a child, like on like just trying to do the sport that I'd fell in love with.
Yeah.
So me and my mum, we just kind of didn't have this idea that black people don't swim. She's from Ghana. She used to swim in the sea all the time. And ironically, my dad, who is white, doesn't know how to swim. So for me, it's always have this like, there's always been this like a little bit like, like there's something really deep here, but it's never affected me. And that's why I'm trying to use my voice as much as possible to get anyone, any background, any color, please like get into swimming or just try lessons, give it a go. If you're a parent and you don't know how to swim, please give your children that opportunity to learn how to swim if you have the money. It can be life-saving. I really hope you don't have to use it like that, but if you need that skill, you need that skill. And yeah, just a little anecdote of how it was for me sometimes as a swimmer. My mum used to have people approach her at competitions, strangers from other clubs, saying, oh my God, we didn't expect Alice Deering to look like that. And we never understood it. We were like, oh, maybe it's because like I was really, really small. Like I was tiny. I'm only 5'5" now, but I was very, very small for a child. And I would post like good times as like a 9, 10, 11-year-old. My name, Alice Deering. Anyway, me and my mum thought it was honestly because I was small and petite. Then it was only when I was like 16 years old that I thought about these words and that they were approaching my black parent, the only black woman at the competition, and saying, oh, we didn't expect your daughter to look like that. And then I've started to put two and two together. And it sounds really naive that I didn't realize it at the time, that my mum didn't realize it at the time, or maybe she did, but she didn't say that that's the angle they were going for. But I'm grateful that I didn't think, oh my God, they've realized that I have a very English, that's white sounding name. And then they're approaching my black mother to tell them that they didn't think her daughter was black. So I don't know. It's really one of those things where there's a lot of racial issues wrapped up in that. But as I'm saying, I'm happy I didn't have to deal with it as a kid because it's a lot. It is a lot.
Did you feel any, well, you didn't have to deal with it, but did you feel like other swimmers may have looked at you differently?
Yeah, I do. There were times where little bits of just stupid, ignorant comments, never really to me or about me, but about other people that I would hear. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, one girl said that she didn't want to swim in a lane with any Indian people. And I was like, we were young, we were very young. It was obviously a very terrible comment. And I just moved away from her. I didn't know what to do. I was like, I'm not Indian, but there's an Indian girl in here. And then like, does she think I'm Indian? And then so I just moved away from her. I told my mum went and complained to the coach. And yeah, it just, thankfully there weren't many issues like that. But I don't know if I was just a little bit blind to them sometimes, as I'm saying, because I don't know, I'm so focused on what I want to do and where I wanted to be as a swimmer that if someone was funny towards me in a certain way or gave off certain vibes, like I'd probably just say that they were weird. I wouldn't really put it down to if they were going towards a certain like discriminatory lens. And again, I think sometimes being ignorant to these issues, especially as a child, especially as a teenager, is safe. It's a way of safeguarding yourself. And I'm not saying we should close off the education and understanding towards our communities in that way, but it's a form of protection for myself, especially in a white space, especially in a very white space where there weren't many people that I could have conversations like this with. So it stops me from, because I overthink. I think this is my point. I'm a big overthinker. So if I was constantly like, well, they think I shouldn't be here because I'm black. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe they're right. Like nobody else looks like me. You see how quickly that spirals into, okay, well, I'll just stop going training and then I'm no longer competing. So yeah, there was a swimming coach who didn't coach me, had no affiliation with him in any way. And he called me skinny N-word to another swimmer. And the swimmer came and told me. I reported it to my club, and then it escalated to the point where I could take it to the police. Honestly, I decided not to. I was only 17 years old, and again, this was this thing of like just protecting myself. It was one person's word against the other.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything I could do about it, and truthfully, his use of words is a reflection on him. It's not a reflection on myself. I didn't relate to those words in any way, so that was his problem. And I think in a white space when you're dealing with it like that, I didn't want to make myself feel weaker or disempowered in any way when I was literally on the cusp of making my first world championship team, which I did make. And I was like, why do I have to deal with talking to the police when I just want to swim? Like this shouldn't be my problem. So I let my hands go of it, basically.
Do you think some of that may come from ignorance, jealousy, or all of them?
Jealousy. It was weird going through it when I was a kid. I was always like, why am I being treated like this? I don't know if I was like a bit standoffish, a bit stubborn. Like I look back on my behavior as a child and I was always like, was I just a bit weird? I probably was a little bit, like that's okay. But some of the ways that some kids did react to me was very jealousy led, I would say. I wouldn't like it, and the energy was weird sometimes. So like I never really thought about it properly, to be honest. Never thought it could be any kind of lens. It's only me as I'm speaking now, like verbalizing my thoughts. And so I'm sorry if it just sounds like I'm rambling, but it is a weird one to look back and think. And again, I'm just happy I didn't think about it back then. I'm okay thinking about it now as a 27-year-old who's had hundreds of conversations like these. But as a 9-year-old who's just trying to discover this sport, nah, it's not a safe or fair place for that child.
Okay, so we're going to fast forward it a little bit. So you got to the point where you were competing to qualify for the Worlds, and you got to that level. Did your mindset change at all when you reached that point where you were starting to compete at the world level?
Oh, my mindset changed. Wow. This is difficult. I can't really remember it doing so. I remember feeling myself maturing and understanding more of what I expect from myself. But it was always really about, let's get to this qualification meet, let's qualify, and then let's see what you do at the competition. And I think that's probably a bit telling because I was always wanting to qualify so much. And then when you get to that meet, you're like, oh my gosh, I've actually done it now. I need to figure out what I'm doing here, which is telling in some of my results. Some of them where I was very confident I would qualify, I did really well. And then others where I was like, just qualify. I then get to the meet and I didn't do as well. So I don't know if my mindset changed much. It's difficult to say now as an adult because I feel like I always had this kind of way of thinking about it. But I mean, as a teenager, it's difficult when you're in it and you've got your coach telling you kind of what to think and how you should be approaching the sport. And I would always kind of be at odds with my coach because he would say something that I would just absolutely disagree with. But I'm not one of those people who can just nod along and go with it. I really need to have my own thought process and I need to believe it myself. Because the moment if I don't believe it, then even if I try, like, Alice, this is right, if I don't really believe it, I'm not going to commit to it and it's not going to actually happen. So I'd say my mindset didn't change much, to be honest, because I've always been stubborn. I've always wanted to think for myself, and finding coaches that wanted to allow me to think for myself at times felt challenging. And that was something that it was only when I got older that I realized I was like that and that I understood who I was and could navigate that correctly.
Like that kind of leads me to my next question, which is around coaches in terms of finding the right coach for yourself and what you expected from a coach. Did that change the more you progressed in your career, or was that the same throughout it?
Oh, okay. I'll start with the first part first in terms of finding the correct coach. This was, yeah, as a teenager, I would say, I just kind of ended up somewhere where it was a really good coach. Everyone was a good swimmer. I was doing well, and I didn't get on with him, to be honest. He wrote the training sessions well. He knew what I needed, well versed in everything that a swimmer of that age needs, but we did not get on. I didn't like the way he spoke to me. He didn't like the way I spoke to him, and I ended up swimming really well under him, to be honest. And it was one of those things where I would have swam well anywhere, but the way that he coached and was able to get me to a certain level really took my swimming career and gave me the platform to become the Olympian that I became. So it's a really difficult one for me where I'm really passionate about making sure you have the right coach, but at the same time it's that balance of, I suppose, in a sense, sacrifice. Because there was a sacrifice that I made and I suppose he made in terms of, like, we didn't get on, but I was still doing well. So it was like this odds and ends where I could move somewhere and be happier, but would I be swimming as well? And then would that roundabout actually make me more unhappy? And I say this, we had our ups and downs. We did get on, like, a lot of the time, but I just remember there were quite a few times when we would have arguments, or I would do things to annoy him on purpose, like I would train badly and then sprint the last one just to annoy him, which I know is so toxic. But please bear in mind, I was like 15 years old, like it was childish or immature. Obviously, that's matured out of me since, but I think it's just telling of my stubbornness and my nature. But as I got older, I realized that you're not just going to gel with any coach, or any coach just because they can make one swimmer good won't make you good, and vice versa. So one place, the place that I went to after school was Loughborough University. I went to the National Training Centre and I was getting on really well there. But then my second year, I realised I just wasn't enjoying it. I was hating it. Actually, that was one of the times I was really disliking it. And because it was the National Training Centre, is where all the best swimmers in Britain train, or like half of the best swimmers, because the other half are at Bath down the road. I was like, no, I need to be here. I have to be here. This is where I belong. I want to be one of the best swimmers, and this is how you become one of the best swimmers. And British Swimming didn't see it like that, and they actually ended up kicking me out of that squad and kicking me off of funding as well. And I was like broken after this, because funding and being in that squad was how I had based my self-worth as a swimmer. And I had both those things taken away from me over 2 phone calls within half an hour of each other, and just didn't know what to do. Took some more time off. It was just after my summer break, so I took some more time off. And I ended up coming back into swimming and into the training squad, which I stayed into until I retired. And it was with a coach that was really willing to let me find myself in the sport again, and was willing to try new things, put in a different training model, and just listen to what I wanted and what I needed. And I felt in the other training squad that I got kicked out of that I wasn't able to have that voice, because it was full of athletes who were much better than I was. And just like it's the British swimming training squad, right? So I didn't feel like I should have a say in what I'm doing. Like, whatever the coach is doing is right. It's exactly right. And if it's not working, it's on me. That's my fault. And that's not necessarily the case. It was probably like a two-way thing. It's just what didn't work for me, and that's fine. But I couldn't see that, and there was no way I was ever going to let that go. So what I thought was the biggest, like, most detrimental thing to my career in terms of getting kicked out of that training squad ended up taking me to the Olympic Games, because I got on so well with my coach. He listened to me, I listened to him, I told him what I wanted, and he would just be like, okay, yeah, cool, let's do that, let's try it. And liked hearing from my input, whereas before I was terrified to give my input. So I think it's really about having a coach who can nurture whatever you need, because some swimmers don't need to give any input. They're really happy to just listen and go. And I honestly wish I was one of those athletes. I think I'd have been a better swimmer because of it, but I couldn't switch off my mind. I couldn't stop my mind from thinking that way. So for me, it meant that to get the best results out of myself, I did have to find someone that was willing to listen to me, or I should say that I was willing to give my opinions to.
It's a very, very interesting subject, coach and athlete relationship, because like you've mentioned, I've seen in other sports where some people, the highest level they performed at is with the coach that they dislike the most. And it's hard because I guess if you want to move from there, you have to make sure you get the right balance, not just someone who listens and someone you get on with, but someone who actually offering you something. Because if you get that wrong, it can end up backfiring.
Exactly. It's a really weird one when I'm saying it out loud. I'm like, so as a teenager, I was with the coach that I didn't get on with. I swam really well, but then the coach that I did get on with really well and who listened to me and listened to my input, I also swam really well with. And there's some other really good coaches in the middle of that too, but those are kind of the two main ones who I would say defined my career. And it's on like kind of two ends of the spectrum in terms of like the way they approached me. And I guess as a teenager, I suppose I probably did need that. Like, really needed that, like, okay, like you need to get on with this. Or it was one of those things that even if I had a bad training session and didn't commit myself to it properly, I was still swimming like 6 or 7K. Like it was still like a good chunk of volume. So it's a really weird one to a lot of this is luck sometimes, and that's what I think is so difficult about sport is right place, right time, right mindset, right coach. It requires so many small things which seem insignificant at the time, but when you look back, you realize that was actually a big deal to come together at the right time to make everything work and you get that performance that you want. But yeah, it is so interesting hearing that people don't like their coach and then they compete really well with them. And I can't say for me. I think there was a fuel in me that was like, I need to prove him wrong, and maybe that's what he was trying to drag out of me in a way, because I never really responded well to compliments as a swimmer. Like when it's like, oh, good job. And I'm not beaming in the pool being like, oh my gosh, yay. Like I've made him proud or something like that. It was kind of like, okay, cool. Like I tried to take winning and losing in the same kind of just calmness. And I think some coaches really struggled with that with me because they would say, oh, that was a good training session, Alice. And I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I wasn't giving much back, and that's not the response they expected from me. Whereas both of the two coaches on either end were kind of fine with that approach that I was taking. So there are so many small finite things in someone's personality that can lead to working and gelling well with someone, whether you get on well or not, and thinking that you like them but actually not working together well.
So with this coach, you then, like you mentioned, you qualified for the Olympics. It was Tokyo.
Yes, Tokyo, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms, this is kind of a loaded question. Describe to me how you felt at the time, but then also that time was also a crazy time in the world. How did you navigate all of that time, really?
Yes, this was mad. I didn't navigate that. I think it was just one of those things where I was like, I need to do this. And qualifying for the Olympics, I never normally feel confident on a start line. I felt confident at junior competitions because I was like, I've got this. I know what I'm doing. Like, I know what I'm doing here. But as senior competitions, I always doubted myself quite a lot, to be honest. But on the start line to qualify for Tokyo was one of the few times as a senior swimmer that I was like, no, you have to do this. Like, there's no universe in which you do not qualify for the Olympics. So you get in and you do it. I just remember like about a year or so leading up to the Olympics, just constantly like pretty much every night in bed being like, you don't have to qualify yet, like chill out. Like I'd literally feel my heart rate raise when I thought about the opportunity to go to the Olympics. And I really had to like calm myself down because I was like, Alice, you need to go to sleep. This is silly. And then you finally get to it and you're like, well, you're finally here now. You've been looking forward to this for however many days, months, years. Get in and do it. And it's obviously not always that simple because sport, you're competing against other people. Somebody else could have a better day than you. They take that opportunity and they run with it. And I was just trying to do everything in my power to make sure that at least I got out and said, hey, I did all I could. And it did end up going my way. With everything with COVID wrapped around it, we were quite fortunate that swimming and like sports athletes at like that level were given, well, it was the phrase we were using at the time, a special, oh gosh, I can't even remember the phrase. Basically, we were allowed to train through the ebbings of lockdowns in and out. The first big lockdown in March 2020 to like May was I didn't see water for like 3-4 months. But then after that point, my training never stopped. So it's a really weird one actually, where I remember like lockdown as just that March. But obviously, for so many other reasons, and everybody else, including myself, because obviously I couldn't go and see people when it was lockdown at other times. But my life didn't change too much, and it just allowed me to focus on training. And oh gosh, I was even doing a dissertation at the time that I was like at the Olympics too. So I'm always been very fond of the idea of that you have something else alongside your swimming career, whatever it may be. It could be a university degree, it could be a beauty course, it could be photography, anything, just to have a little bit of, a little bit something more to yourself that's just not wrapped around your performance as an athlete.
Yeah, so you qualified. Obviously, that was a big, massive moment in terms of the history for Britain and having a black swimmer, female swimmer at the Olympics. Did you know how big that was at the time, or was that something that had to be told to you?
Yeah, I think I knew how big it was. Like it was, yeah, I did know because I'd co-founded the Black Swimming Association by that point. I'd had so many people be interested in my story from news organizations around the world. And I saw it as a pressure of like, if I have all of these people behind me, how can I lose? It wasn't a pressure of, oh my God, I need to do this for my culture. I didn't feel it like that. I was really like, I have all of these people rooting for me. There's no universe again in which I don't do this. Like they really do believe in me, and that energy is pushing me along. And that's how I viewed it the whole time. I never saw it as, oh my gosh, I failed like all of these people if it doesn't happen. I really just saw it as uplifting, which I'm really happy to say because it's so unique. It's such a unique place for an athlete to sit in, to contribute to helping change something that is so important, but also being present and aware of what they're doing at the time, because you often hear of like, oh, this person was the first XYZ to do this, but you can tell they didn't have the support at that time, and they didn't have the knowledge or the recognition of their achievement, and they won't realize that themselves potentially ever in their life. But I was in the present, knowing what I was doing, and had that support behind me. So it's difficult because I wish I didn't have to talk about it,
Yeah.
in the sense of I wish there was a world in which black people swam,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like a whole like racism, stereotype, myth thing that we shouldn't swim. But it is a real issue, and that's why I keep talking about it, because we can swim and we need to encourage people in our communities to learn to swim.
Where do you think that stereotype came from?
Oh my gosh. I've had so many different like versions and tellings of it. It's kind of like, I think it probably started in America in terms of the slave trade, with the whole, you should stay away from water because you can't swim. And it was basically to keep people in line, in a sense of to stop them from running away. Because versions of swimming that I've heard is that black people in West Africa actually found like freestyle the most efficient stroke, and that it naturally came, as quite a few things do, from Africa and from that side of the world, and then it kind of gets drawn out and bullied out of you through like propaganda, and then these myths and these horrible like racist stereotypes. I do know that the whole bone density myth is from a journalistic academic journal, which was a zoology journal, saying why black people shouldn't swim, because exactly, it was from like the 1920s maybe, perhaps. So steeped in racism, absolutely steeped in racism, where it's something that the BSA is working very hard to disprove, and just kind of showcase that everybody floats differently. So myself, for example, I don't naturally float in a starfish position. So someone would say, oh, she can't float, but obviously I know how to float. And the point is, you might not naturally float in a starfish position when you're relaxed, but everybody can be taught how to use their muscles to float like that. And that my float looks different to your float, who looks different to a white person's float. And it's very varied amongst everybody, regardless of your race. And the whole point is that you can still learn how to swim. So it's It's a really complex issue. We're facing a lot of challenges. There's financial issues, of course, which every industry, I think, around the world is feeling at the moment. But the swimming industry or the aquatics industry has got so many issues within that. Accessibility in terms of pools closing down, expense of people getting to pools, stuff like that. Again, that affects everyone from any race. And then the hair issue, the bone density issue, the generational trauma, the aquaphobia. There are so many issues which our communities face. So wherever possible, I'm always yapping about this, that if you have the money, if you have the funds, take yourself swimming, learn how to swim, get lessons, encourage people to learn how to swim in your community too, because it's important. It's a life skill.
So you're doing a lot around that. What support do you think you would need to make this more of a common theme? Because the myth has been there for hundreds of years and is probably not going to go away overnight. What things do you think you need to make sure that we can force a change?
It's so difficult because I always just say money. Like, it sounds so bad. It's like, we need money. In the sense of, it's one of those where I think if everybody was given the opportunity to learn how to swim for free, people would take that up, right? I mean, even if you can't make every session, at least you get some knowledge, get some experience. And learning to swim and swimming pools and pool time is just so expensive. But also, I do think we need a push from the culture and our community in terms of having these conversations like this, but also just the encouragement of you can learn to swim and getting this knowledge and information out. So I think it's a double-end thing of, we need the money to be able to give people these opportunities, but we also need the self-belief from our people, from our communities, that they are capable of this. And I know we've been told for so many generations that you're not capable, but I promise you are. And having that belief and that kind of rejection and that rebellious nature to give something a go and support each other, and the support is obviously so important.
So I'll go a little bit back into the end of your swimming career. So you completed Tokyo, and then you aimed to qualify for the next Olympics,
Paris.
which you didn't. Yeah, for Paris, which you didn't. What made you come to the conclusion that, you know what, it's time for me to wrap up my career?
Oh my gosh, I decided during the race that I knew I wasn't going to qualify out, that I was done. And I even got out of the race early. I was swimming that badly. I was like, I don't need this. Let's just get out. I knew I wasn't going to qualify. And that was the only thing I cared about. I'll being honest. Like, I didn't, another World Championships didn't excite me. I'd done 3 by this point. I wanted another Olympic Games. And the reason I wanted to go to the Olympics is because I was so unhappy with my performance in Tokyo. Okay. So that was kind of the thing that was fueling me to try and get to Paris. Yeah. And it didn't work out for me. And I was like, LA is way too far away at this point. I mean, initially I wasn't even planning on going to Paris. I think it's because it was that short cycle, that 3-year cycle, that I was mentally like, I've got 1 year less to think about, let's give it a go. But LA, I mean, I'm looking at my calendar now. It's February 2025. It's 3 years away. And I retired over a year ago at this point. So, basically age, in the sense of, I want to explore other things in my life. I've now moved in with my fiance. We've been living apart for all of that time that I was swimming, basically. And I was like, I'm ready to move on with my life. If I do want to have children, yet undecided. If I do want to have children, I want to have time for myself before, potentially finishing my swimming career, and then realizing I need to have kids in the next 5 years. Like, it's just there was too much going on, and I didn't feel like I could get more out of myself, in the sense of waiting for another Olympics that may not happen, that I may get injured, or who knows what. So I'm happy to say I finished the sport happy. Yeah. That specific race, I was obviously heartbroken because I was trying to qualify for Paris and I was in a very good place training wise, but I was genuinely happy in training. I was really enjoying it. I was enjoying the people I was training with, was pushing myself, but for whatever reason it didn't work out on the day. But I was sad to leave swimming. I wasn't like super excited by it, and I'm happy to say that, because I always believe in leaving the party on a high. You don't want to watch it as, as the party starts to fade out and it gets a bit dead. Yeah. I didn't want to leave swimming like that, so I left it in a happy place.
You kind of mentioned that you weren't going to do Paris. Do you think potentially you may have subconsciously checked out before you got to the race?
That's deep. I'm not gonna lie, yeah, it was tough. So got out of Tokyo, was like going straight back into training, let's go. Got back into training and was just like, this is rough. Was terrified of racing. I did Tokyo in August, went to a competition in December. I remember getting to the competition and just being terrified of racing again. Like, putting on my racing suit, I was like just scared. Like I was like, I don't want to get back in there again. Did go in and race, did okay. And then in April, I had tried to qualify for the Commonwealth Games in the 800 free. Sounds crazy saying it out loud, but like at the time I was like, yeah, I can do this. I've got this. Swam terribly at trials and started hating training again, but hating it. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't see a way through this, hating it. There was nothing redeemable. There was no excitement for what's to come. I told my coach, and this coach that I obviously have like really good rapport and get on well with, and he said, just take some time out. So I did, took 3 months off, maybe three to 4 months off, which again is basically unheard of in swimming. Got back into it and started really enjoying it, like really, really enjoying it. And I like fully had that confidence and belief that I could do and go to Paris. But I do know what you mean. I was like, I just don't think it was for me. I was not meant to be in Paris. Like I really do believe that, and I'm fine with that. Like it wasn't my day. I wasn't meant to qualify. Many things that I did in that season that I would have been training for Paris, but was a retired athlete. I was living my life. I was enjoying it. Ended up going to Paris as a spectator. Enjoyed it so much. Thought I would absolutely hate it and be like really twisted and bitter inside. But it was a really nice letting go moment for me that I was like, I just really wasn't meant to be here, and that's fine. And it's difficult because I typically normally speak about it and like tear up because I think there's been enough time and healing, and I'm really enjoying my life that I'm not in any way upset that I didn't qualify. I was at the time, obviously, but things happen for a reason, and I'm in a really happy place.
Did you know what you were going to do once you retired?
Yeah. So I was always like, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing, but not swim. Is basically what
Yeah.
I was doing. And that is what I'm doing now. You know, chatting to people, speaking opportunities. I'm doing some commentary for World Aquatics, which I'm really enjoying actually. So, and it's funny, it's because I'm commentating on open water swimming, which is obviously my event that I did. So I'm actually way more knowledgeable about it now than I was as a swimmer because I'm like have to be really in tune with what's happening and all the other swimmers and what they're doing. So in a funny way, like I'm still heavily involved in it. Yeah, I did kind of know. I studied politics at university and did a master's in social media and political communication, both at Loughborough University. So I always knew I had like options or my degrees as kind of a fallback to find a career and find a job when I finished swimming. But with everything I built with the BSA and my brand ambassadorship and being an advocate, I thought, let's try and give this kind of freelance lifestyle a go, see where it leads, and it has been going well, and I'm enjoying it.
Brilliant. Last question before we close off. What do you think, when you look back at your career, what do you think were your three biggest strengths, and what do you think were your weaknesses that you think you can use in life going forward?
So I'd say my biggest strength was my stubbornness. But I'd also say it's a weakness as well. Like I said, I was so stubborn to the point that I just wouldn't do something, even if I was like, Alice, you need to do this. And it's like, I'm not doing it. So I think understanding my stubborn nature and like knowing when I need to play on it, but also when I need to just say, hey, let's listen to yourself and step back. You can do that tomorrow. Has been like a real big balancing act for me. So that's probably one of my biggest strengths. Another one. Oh my God, it's like resilience. I don't know if that's just the same thing as stubborn. It's like I really will just be like, okay, let's just bounce back from it. Like until it was the point where I knew I didn't want to bounce back from it anymore. If that makes sense. It was constantly like, okay, you've hated swimming. Take a breath, let's go again. Finding that way to keep going. And I suppose the actual like physical aspect of myself is that I always had like a really good aerobic base. My biggest weakness as an athlete in terms of my physical nature was my strength endurance. My strength endurance just wasn't that good.
Yeah.
And that was my limiting factor in terms of getting me to a certain point because my muscles would just like ache and tire. I felt like, and I just couldn't deal with that. But in terms of my aerobic, my lungs and my heart was always really strong.
Yeah.
Sorry, really niche. I know it's not to do with mindset, but I think that was a big part of my swimming career. I was trying to think of anything else. Yeah, okay. So I think final strength I would say is knowing what I want. And I've always known what I want with my swimming career. The times that I've maybe one or two times I didn't know what I wanted, and that's when I don't swim well. I've always known I want to get to this point and I want to do this, or I want to do this at this competition. It doesn't always happen, but it was a really easy way of like compartmentalizing everything and just focusing on that one thing and then getting to that point and then moving on.
So I'll just add a little bit to that as we close off. So in terms of the weaknesses, is there any of those weaknesses now that you think I need to improve that to use in my life going forward?
Yeah, I think in terms of the stubbornness, I just really need to learn. Sometimes if you don't want to do something, it's difficult because I was going to say if you don't want to do something, sometimes you just got to go and do it. But I did that with training a lot. Like we would wake up at 30 in the morning. I didn't really want to do that, but I had to do that. So it's difficult. I'd say definitely a weakness that I would like to get better at is overthinking. And sometimes you just need to switch off, but I can't really switch off. There's always something that I'm thinking about or planning or plotting in some way. And sometimes you really just need to drown out the noise or just crack on with something and not have to sit and spend half an hour thinking, how am I going to manage this? When it's 2 months away. You'll figure it out when you get there. Yeah, sorry. And it's really wishy-washy. It's a difficult question.
But it's good because it does make sense. Like you mentioned, it's something that can be a strength, but can also be a weakness. So it is important that you think about it. And yeah, it's everyone's strengths and weaknesses are different, and it's how it impacts your life, really.
Exactly. Yeah, there's two sides to it. I think with something like stubbornness, or I think with most strengths, there's probably another side to it that you're it can actually be so strong it verges back around on being a weakness. Like confidence, for example, if you're overconfident, it can end up being arrogance and etc. So
100%.
yeah, I think just being self-aware of where you're at and what you need in the present is really important.
Alice, thank you for coming on the podcast today. Where could people find you?
Instagram. I was going to say Twitter. I don't bother with Twitter anymore. Instagram and LinkedIn. Alice Deering X on Instagram and Alice Deering OLY on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Alice. For those of you that are existing listeners, welcome back. For those of you that are new listeners, welcome aboard. There'll be more episodes coming soon. Until next time, peace.